Virginia, early 1980s. The city of Richmond is in a state of panic as a series of rapes and sexual assaults occur. Women are attacked in quiet residential areas, and the police are frantically searching for the perpetrators. In the midst of this tension, Thomas Haynesworth, an 18-year-old black man, is arrested after one of the victims identifies him on the street. Thomas had no criminal record and was a diligent worker at a local grocery store. But a strange coincidence, a face and build identical to the real culprit, would send him into a nightmare that would last nearly 30 years. From the beginning, Thomas maintained his innocence. He had no motive, no evidence linking him to the crime scenes, other than the identifications of a few victims. But in the legal system of the time, eyewitness testimony was considered gold. In 3 separate trials in 1984, Thomas was convicted of rape in 3 separate attacks and sentenced to a total of 74 years in prison. He entered prison before he had even lived out his youth, believing that one day the truth would come out. Thomas Haynesworth entered prison with a sentence of 74 years, a number that is almost equivalent to a life sentence. He was only 18 years old at the time. During the farewell to his family before being taken to prison, his mother burst into tears, unable to believe that her son, a gentle, obedient boy, had been accused of being a serial rapist. Life in prison was harsh. Thomas not only faced a violent environment, but also suspicion and hostility from other prisoners who assumed he was a rapist. This led to him being isolated and even assaulted many times. Yet, despite all this, Thomas never lost his composure or his belief in the truth. During his nearly 3 decades in prison, Thomas spent much of his time in the prison library. He read law, learned about other wrongful convictions, and wrote hundreds of letters pleading for help to legal organizations, journalists, lawyers, and even the governor. No one answered. For decades, the legal system ignored his pain. Even more frightening, even when other cases occurred in the same manner, in the same area, and the perpetrator was later arrested, a man named Leon Davis, the courts refused to review Thomas's case, because in their eyes his case was done and there were witnesses. However, Thomas did not give up. He knew that as long as he persevered, that day would come. English image prompt. Young black man behind prison bars, reading legal books in a prison library, 1990 setting. Dim lighting, sense of isolation, and quiet determination. In the early 2000s, as DNA analysis technology began to develop and become widely used in criminal investigations, legal organizations began to re-examine old cases, especially those that relied largely on witness testimony rather than clear physical evidence. That's when the name Thomas Haynesworth came back into the spotlight. The InnocenceProject, which supports those wrongly convicted, began investigating his record. They found several irregularities. 3 of the cases in which Thomas was convicted had no physical evidence. And notably, several other attacks had occurred after his arrest, with a perpetrator who fit an almost identical description. The suspect was a man named Leon Davis, a serial rapist who was later arrested and confessed to many of the attacks. In 2005, a semen sample from one of the cases in which Thomas was convicted was analyzed for DNA. The results shocked everyone. Not a match for Thomas, but a perfect match for Leon Davis. However, the remaining 2 convictions did not have sufficient biological evidence to support DNA testing. Therefore, despite clear evidence that Thomas was innocent in at least 1 case, he has not been released. U.S. law requires that new evidence be clear and convincing for all convictions if a person is to be completely exonerated. But a ray of light appeared. For the first time in more than 20 years, Thomas had real hope. English image prompt. Close-up of DNA lab techniques analyzing forensic evidence. DNA strands glowing on a screen. Behind is a case file labeled 1984. Haynesworth. Hopeful atmosphere. After DNA results exonerated Thomas in a case, what surprised the public most was not the evidence, but who stood up to defend him. It was Virginia's top prosecutors. Ken Cuccinelli, a conservative Republican who was then the state's attorney general, and David P. Schmid, the Richmond prosecutor. Both had been instrumental in keeping Thomas behind bars. But now they had changed. We can't let an innocent person go to jail because the system doesn't have a way to fix it, Cuccinelli said. That political courage resonated. A prosecutor sided with a convicted man, a rarity in American judicial history. Cuccinelli and his team began to review all the cases tied to Thomas. The similarities between the attacks, the method of attack, the area, the time, and especially the appearance of the perpetrator, matched the profile of Leon Davis. The victims were also interviewed. Some admitted that they might have been mistaken. Pressure began to mount on the court system. In 2011, after nearly 27 years in prison, Thomas Haynesworth was released on parole pending a parole hearing. He walked out of prison to a cheering crowd of his mother, supporters, and even those who had doubted him. For the first time in decades, Thomas breathed free air. But he was not yet vindicated, not officially. The journey was not yet over. English image prompt. Black man in his 40s walking out of prison gates into daylight, greeted by his elderly mother and supporters. Emotional moment, cameras flashing. Despite being released on parole in 2011, Thomas Haynesworth is still not considered innocent in the eyes of the law. He lives in a state of between two worlds, free but still labeled a paroled sex offender. But this time, Thomas was not alone. A host of lawyers, human rights organizations, and judicial officials continued to fight on his behalf. Finally, in December 2011, the Virginia Court of Appeals officially declared Thomas Haynesworth innocent in all three cases, overturning all wrongful convictions. It was a historic moment. Thomas became the first person in Virginia to be completely exonerated thanks to a collaborative effort between wrongful death advocacy groups and state prosecutors. He was soon removed from the sex offender registry, awarded restitution from the state of Virginia, about $1.4 million, and assistance in reintegrating into society. But money can't make up for lost years. You can say I'm being compensated, Thomas said in an interview, but no amount of money can buy back my youth, my love, my family, and the things I missed out on. Without bitterness or anger, Thomas devoted the rest of his life to helping others who had been wrongly convicted. He cooperated with legal organizations, spoke out publicly, and became a symbol of faith, strength, and tolerance. His story has been chronicled in numerous television shows, major newspaper articles, and is a reminder that justice doesn't always come soon enough, but it must come. English image prompt. Middle-aged black man in a suit, standing before a crowd, giving a speech about justice and wrongful convictions. Confident, dignified, hopeful expression, flags in the background.